For those of you who saw my Growing Greens Indoors 3 Ways video, you know that I promised you an update of how the Aerogarden did with growing tomatoes and peppers. So today, as you can see, I've successfully got a crop of ripe cherry tomatoes here. I've not tasted them yet, but they are red and they are ripe. Now, before I give these guys the taste test, I'm going to share the growing process with you. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Aerogarden, it is an all-in-one home hydroponic kit. It comes with everything you need and is super easy to put together, as you can see here. And when you've got it assembled, you simply pop in one of the pods. Now you can buy these either pre-seeded with varieties or you can seed your own. And for this first time out, I went with Aerogarden's pre-seeded pods. This one was listed as a mini heirloom red cherry tomato, and this one as a jalapeno. I really hate not knowing what specific varieties I'm growing, but for the sake of experimentation, I figured I'd just start with these. So as you can see, this cherry tomato is a really nice compact size that fits well in this space. I ran into some trouble with the jalapeno. This guy pretty much wanted to be a full-sized jalapeno, so I just let him go. I did not prune or trim or anything to begin with, and I had branches clear up to here. Now, unfortunately, with the first go around, it was setting all of its flowers up above the height of this light. So I wasn't going to end up with any fruit anyway. I decided to aggressively hack this way back and see what would happen. Now, fortunately, it did sprout out a lot of new growth, put on new branches, put on new blooms, and I've got a few blooms down here now that hopefully will result in some peppers. I've had to hack it back up here because it keeps wanting to grow up here, and unfortunately some of my blooms are setting up here as well. So by cutting all this back, I'm reducing my yields pretty significantly. So I am going to give this another try using my own seeds in these pods, because I have a couple different varieties that are true dwarfs that should stay below the level of this light, because this is at the highest point that it will go. Now, another issue that I ran into, and I did not think about at first, was that because this plant is not rooted into anything, this is just water in here, by the time it set all this fruit, it became quite top heavy. So I didn't have a good way to anchor this. I ended up just tying it to my paper towel holder, which did the trick, but was not the most aesthetically pleasing option in the world. So I will definitely have to be looking at some tricks to support these a little better once they're fully loaded with fruit. And to give you an idea of how long it took to get to this point, the day I am filming today is April 12th, and I started these from seed on January 8th. So I was hoping they might come to fruit a little sooner than like a standard garden grown tomato, but that was not the case. They took their sweet time. And I thought it would be fun to show a quick time progression of the process of growth on this tomato and pepper. So check this out. So that brings us to today. You will note that the foliage on this tomato is starting to look pretty rough. And if you're growing this, I wouldn't be overly concerned or surprised by this, as long as it's happening after your fruit start forming and coloring. And that is because the plant's basically putting all of its energy into ripening these fruit, not maintaining healthy foliage anymore. So at this point, the foliage becomes less of a concern than bringing this fruit to maturity. Another thing I wanted to point out for those of you who might be interested in doing this yourself, just a few keys to think about is that if you're doing fruiting plants like tomatoes and peppers, you are going to have to hand pollinate. So in nature, outdoors, the bees and other pollinators will do this work for you. Indoors, typically you don't have any bees, so you're going to have to act as the bee. Now, when I started this, I did not realize Aerogarden actually sells a tool. I think it's called like Be the Bee, and it's a pollinator tool. Don't waste your money. You can do the same thing with a little tiny soft paintbrush, and all you're gonna do is get that bristle in there, kind of knock loose some pollen, get it on the bristles, and go to your next flower and do the same thing. That's what I did with this tomato, and you can see that my set is really good for such a small tomato. The other thing that you can do is shake the plants, and that will work because you will drop some pollen and hopefully it will land on some of the other flowers, but it's not going to be quite as effective as actually going in there and hand pollinating. The other thing I did not realize, because I didn't have to do this with my lettuce because it's such a short maturity, is that with these vegetables that take longer to grow, you are supposed to be changing out your water it ends up to being about every month. So in the beginning, that's not a big deal, but as these plants get larger, it gets more and more difficult to do. You just have to very carefully basically tip this thing over a sink, drain out all the water, and then refill it with new water. So that's just something to be aware of. And then the other lesson that I learned is that, as I mentioned before, you're only supposed to be doing 2 plants in here if you're doing larger like tomatoes and peppers. Well, you've got 4 other holes that are open. I thought that I could just be clever and come in with these little lids from my seed pods and cover those holes. Apparently what you want are actually completely opaque coverings. So again, of course, Aerogarden sells little plugs that you can use, but after digging a little online, I found that people were having success just using things like duct tape, or just, you could do the same thing with these if you spray painted them black. And that is to inhibit the growth of the green algae that you will get in this kit if it is getting any light in there. So I made do with this. It was fine, but I did have a little bit of that algae growth, which was undesirable. And if you have an Aerogarden and there's any other tricks that you have discovered to doing this thing, definitely let me know in the comments below. But now, the moment that I have been eagerly awaiting for months, I'm going to give these guys the taste test. I have 1 tomato on here I've been eyeballing. It was the very first one to ripen. Oh, she's so cute. And keep in mind, I have not had a fresh tomato since last September and beginning of October. Definitely smells like a tomato. I want to say that was the most amazing thing ever. It was not. So I waited 4 months for a tomato that tasted worse than what I could buy at the grocery store. That's really depressing. Okay, lesson learned, but I am not giving up hope yet. Like I said, I have a few other varieties that I know are supposed to have good flavor, and I'm going to try those in here next. And if I don't succeed with those, I may just stick to growing lettuce and herbs in this thing. And if you have any really great varieties that have yielded terrific flavor grown in the Aerogarden, please drop a line in the comments below because I definitely will want to try those. And in the meantime, wish me luck that my jalapenos turn out tasting a little better than my tomatoes did. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.